Well, welcome. It is Fall into Fat Burning Week 2, and I'm Dr. Jeralyn Brossfield, and I'm excited to have all of you with us. Um, Tonight, what we're going to do is I'm going to share a secret that has been the thing that I learned first through doing Optavia as a program. And once we put it into place, and I was starting to research more about weight loss and what were the tricks, what were the real pieces of science behind the methodologies that worked. This is what I came to understand worked no matter what you did as far as your particular version of how you wanted to eat. In other words, there are people who want to eat paleo, there are people who want to eat vegan, there are people who want to eat Mediterranean, but there's one commonality that if we learn this, you can use no matter what you do and apply for lifelong success. So what I want to do is actually start with sharing my screen in just a moment here so that you can see a formula that I've used now for the last 8 years in my grocery shopping and in our meal preparation. And the geeky part of me actually loves to take a recipe and break it down so that I can make the recipe fit this formula. So this weekend I made almond flour cookies and made them fit this formula. Did the same thing with banana bread. And some of the foods that we've thought were foods we really couldn't eat, we can restructure how we make them and so that they're actually healthy foods, where they will really literally be both appropriate for the protein content that we need to get and also not too high in carbohydrates so that they don't mess us up from a blood sugar standpoint. So one recap statement I want to make from last week, and that is that if you didn't get anything out of last week, the main thing I would say was the take home is that we want to create a steady blood sugar. In other words, if your blood sugar stays steady, ideally between 60 and 90 or 70 and 100, for instance, would be in the perfect world. If your blood sugar stays steady, what that does is let your insulin levels stay steady as well. And so when you have steady insulin levels, that allows you to burn fat, and instead of storing carbohydrates, which you would do if you have high or elevated insulin levels. And the thing that raises our insulin levels is our food, our blood sugar, or foods that have high contents of carbohydrates and raised blood sugars. So that's just a synopsis of what we talked about last week. And if you want more detail, certainly going to last week's Zoom will help you. Or my video called The One Thing that's on my Facebook page also goes through that. So the question around how we do that, how do we put into place healthy eating such that we really can work with whatever is in front of us and know how to do it. Just a minute. Robert, are my glasses glaring? Is that the trouble? Okay. We're doing a few adjustments. I haven't worn glasses on screen before. Ellen, I think you have it mastered, so you'll have to give me some tips. But if you can't see my eyes, I'm just trying to make sure you can see me. So I want to reveal to you a secret that's been the core methodology in how I choose foods and evaluate whether a food is going to raise my blood sugar more than would be appropriate or not. So I call this the 15-gram secret. And I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to then, after that, go through a whole bunch of scenarios that would help you be able to evaluate common things you might encounter in the grocery store or in your garden or in the choices around what you might eat. So here we go. Just a moment. Let me find my share my screen note. I'm going to go here. So here's the drum roll, please. This is fairly simple, but I want to just show you what the screen has here. And this is the 15-gram secret. So the 15-gram secret is this: eat no more than 15 grams of net carbohydrates at any meal or snack. And why is that an issue? Why does that work? The reason that works is that the main impact to our insulin and our blood sugar is carbohydrate. And so it's not that all carbohydrates are bad. There's a lot of phenomenal carbohydrates: lettuce, spinach, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, tomatoes, olives, fruits. All of those have carbohydrate in them that are excellent. Olives are the lowest of the list I just gave you. But there's a lot of carbohydrates that are phenomenal. And certainly when you hear people say, I want to eat a plant-based diet, one of the great things about that diet is that even though a plant-based diet can be high in carbs, if you ignore this secret, the plant-based diet makes it really easy to eat a large volume of food and still stay under 15 grams net carbs. If you eat, 3 cups of broccoli, you're not going to hit 15 grams of carbohydrate. And so the good news about all of our green vegetables is that they don't hit 15 grams of carbohydrate. It's really hard to eat 15 grams of carbohydrate as lettuce or as broccoli or as spinach or as green beans. So you're pretty safe in your green vegetables that you're not going to overeat your carbohydrates if that's your source of carbs. The place that we get into trouble is in our starches. And so foods that are made from grain or foods that have high starch, like potatoes or sweet potatoes or corn or peas, those foods have more carbohydrates in them, and it's pretty easy to get over 15 grams of net carbohydrates in any meal or snack. So this 15-gram rule would be that if you're going to eat, whether you're eating 3 meals a day or 5 to 6 meals a day, like we do within the weight loss phase of our Optavia program, you are going to try to make every meal you eat never rise higher than 15 grams net of carbohydrates. So a couple other pieces of this formula, because there's other aspects that come into play in how you use it. If the protein is higher than 15 grams and the carbs are less than 15 grams, that's no problem. That's fine. It's okay to eat a breast of chicken, for instance, where you're getting about 21 to 25 grams of protein and virtually no carbohydrate. That's an almost pure protein. I would say also that we could say the same thing about fat, and fat is a little more controversial. Have you ever noticed that people have opinions about fat? Like it's almost as big of a deal as religion or politics. I have patients who come in that are like the solid no fat camp, and they're like, I can't eat anything with fat. And I have other people that come in and say, I will only eat fat. I can't have any carbs. And fat is a dividing line that we have in our society, honestly propagated by a lot of misinformation over the years. So the story with this rule and how we put it into place is that if we look at any recipe or any label, or if it's a food that doesn't have a label, which is actually all the better, I'm going to help you know how to do this with food that doesn't have a label, like spinach or like broccoli. But if you look at any label, there's a little formula, and I'm going to scroll down here, and we're going to practice doing this together. So here's the formula. This formula for calculating the effect of foods that have carb and protein in the food is this formula, and I'm going to show you how to use it. Here's the deal. Any foods that meet this criteria, where the total carbs minus fiber equal a net carb count that's less than 15, if that net carb count is less than 15 and your protein is within 5 grams of that or higher than that, that food will not spike your blood sugar. That food is an awesome food to put into your repertoire of your meals. And it will help you maintain your weight, maintain your blood sugar, maintain your nice low stable insulin by using this formula. So let me show you an example. I'm going to pick actually a couple different things. I'm going to first pick an option that some of you have seen perhaps at Trader Joe's. So I'm going to actually unshare my screen. Let's see. So that we can look at some labels using this formula. So I don't know if you guys have seen this product. It's at Trader Joe's. It's a high protein vegetarian burger. It's made of pea protein. So this option, if I were to look at the label, and this is important because just because something is a veggie patty doesn't mean it meets this criteria or fits our 15-gram secret rule. So if we look at this label, I want you to look at the label here under the 250. This is one patty right here under the 250. And if we look at the total carbohydrate count right here, you can see that that number is 12, okay? So that 12 is the total number of carbohydrates. And what we're going to do with that number is actually subtract the fiber. So the 12 grams of carbohydrate minus 4 grams of fiber mean that our net carbohydrates in this food is 8. Okay, so we have 8 grams of fiber, 8 grams net carbohydrates in this protein patty. The total protein in this patty is 26. Okay, so this food meets the criteria because the protein comes out higher than the carbohydrate, and our net carbohydrates are less than 15. So again, just to point that out, 12 grams total carbohydrates minus 4 grams of fiber means that the net carbs in this product are 8, and that number is less than 15 and the protein is higher. So we're okay. This is a food that when I eat this patty is not going to spike my blood sugar, and I don't have to worry that my carbohydrates in this meal are going to go over 15 if I have this with a side of broccoli or a large salad on my plate. That makes kind of a perfect meal if I were to use this food. I'm going to stop for just a minute and ask for feedback. So I'm going to unmute you all because I'm wanting to understand if that makes sense just with this one example. We're going to go through several things where I give very specific examples. So if you have a question, tell me if this is making sense to you. I'm going to put Ellen on the spot for just a second because she's a nurse who I've worked with a lot in the past. And Ellen, I know you've understood the concept of net carbohydrates. Is that making sense as I read this label?
Oh, total sense. Yes, you did it
Ellen,
great.
she may have just stepped away for a second.
Oh, I'm here.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go forward with some other examples because I want to show how much we can get tricked up by labels and how much we can use this rule of thumb. And if we can learn to make this rule of thumb just sort of our default way of reading labels and doing our shopping, it makes it way easier to stock your cupboard with all kinds of things that mean you're not in danger if you pick that food. You really want to end up making your cupboard filled with items that you know you can eat without any trouble, okay? Questions? Sorry. Okay, I'll keep going.
Jeralyn?
So a couple other things. I want to give you an example. This product right here is called Paleo Pancakes. This is by a company called Birch Benders. And Birch Benders pancakes at Costco. You can order this from some of your online resources. And the Birch Benders pancakes have something a little bit misleading. On the front it says paleo. Now what I suspect they meant by paleo was that this does not have wheat flour. It's made of almonds and coconut and cassava and eggs and monk fruit. So it has a lot of things that are good sources of nourishment, and it's not gluten. But the issue with this that I have is we're going to read this label and you're going to see where it's a little deficient and learn a hack that we do in our house, because this is kind of a staple in our house as well. So I want to show you this label. What I'm going to point out right here is that the total carbohydrates on this line where my pen is pointing is 16 grams. Can you see that total carbohydrates at 16 grams? So 16 grams of carbohydrate per 2 to 3 pancakes. And then the fiber in that same serving right here, the next line down, is 5 grams. So 16 minus 5 means this has 11 grams of net carbohydrates, and it has 7 grams of protein. Now, here's the deal. 7 is within 5 of 11, and so right now that would make me say, oh, I'm willing to buy this food. Those are close. But what I am going to do with this food that makes it even better in our household is what we do is for every 1/4 cup of this protein powder that we use, we add 1 egg. So when you're making pancakes or waffles, it's really normal that you would put eggs in it. It makes the consistency better, makes them hold together so they don't fall apart. And so if I'm making one recipe of this pancake batter and I have 3/4 cup of the pancake batter, I will put 3 eggs in that mix. And what that does is make this exactly balanced. It adds 7 grams of protein per serving. And now, instead of my 11 grams net carbohydrates being compared to 7, they're compared to 14 grams of protein. So I can boost the protein in this particular food and make it from barely being unimpacting to my blood sugar, because from 11 to 7, that difference of 11 net carbs to 7 of protein, it's kind of a barely makes it kind of a zone. So if I can shift that and make the protein even a little higher than my net carbs, I've got a food that I can feel good to serve. It meets the 15-gram secret rule, but it also gets enough protein in that this is something that'll stick to your kids' ribs. It will actually, sustain you for a good 3 to 4 hours with a stable blood sugar. So that's a little hack that you can do with this pancake mix. And realize that just because something is labeled paleo, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be exactly balanced for you, of course. I'm seeing a little note here. Let me look in the chat box because I'm getting some messages that I want to just mention back because they may be some good feedback.
No, Jeralyn, it's Robert. I was suggesting
Robert's
that.
just mentioning that if you do want to ask a question, let's have you unmute yourself to ask the question. That way I don't unmute everybody. If you have some noise in your environment, it won't mess everybody else up. This person was just mentioning, Karen, thank you. You mentioned that a serving would need to have at least 5 carbs to be able to subtract the fiber from the carbs. That's true. So let me just take a moment to mention what that means. If you have a food that has no fiber, but is pure sugar, then you can't subtract the fiber from the food that has pure sugar. So in other words, I think where this little rule that Karen is mentioning doesn't hold water is if I had 3 grams of carbohydrate and 3 grams of fiber, those would cancel each other out. It's just that there have to be some carbs and some fiber present in order to use this formula. So in essence, whatever the carb count of your food is, if there's fiber that you can subtract from it, you should be able to use this rule. I don't think there's not a lower limit on being able to use the rule. I'm going to show a couple other foods that are specific to give a little bit more information in things that we tend to think of as freebies or healthy. So let's talk about beans for a minute. This is a can of cannelloni beans. They're white kidney beans from Trader Joe's. And what I would say about these beans is that this is something I keep stocked in my cupboard because they're a really easy thing to add to salads or to meals where I want to boost the protein a little bit, but I don't want to get way off track with the protein and carbohydrate counts. So let me show you how this works. In this case, these beans, I'm going to hold it up so that you can see this. Let me turn it a little bit. The total carbohydrates are 21, and there's 10 grams of fiber on the line right below that. So 21 grams of carbohydrates minus 10 means that we have 11 grams of net carbohydrates. And the protein content of these beans is 8. So 8 is within 5 of 11. This is a food that's not going to spike my blood sugar. So the issue with this food is if I take these beans and I mix them with a high amount of rice or other carbs, and I actually use these in quinoa salad frequently, but when I use them in quinoa salad, what I make sure to do is make it very minimal on the quinoa and maximal on all the good stuff that you can put in it. So if you imagine, for instance, in my quinoa salad, I'll drain a can of these and rinse them under water in a sieve. I'll throw these in with about 2 cups of quinoa. And then I start adding things like chopped cucumber and tomato and capers and onions and any other veggies that sound good that I can throw in there. And then often I'll put pine nuts and feta cheese, which are other protein sources. And that allows me to make a salad that's a high protein salad instead of something that's high carb. One of the things that we debated about today's event that I want to make sure you know so that you make sure we have your email. If you have registered for this course, we do have your email. And what we're going to mail out by email to you is a list of foods that meet these criteria, because there's a lot of foods, especially if you're vegetarian or trying to eat lower meat content in your diet. There's a lot of foods that we've been able to find over the years that people often say, well, how do you cook or how do you set up your pantry? And I'd like to send you each a list that has a bunch of the findings that we've found that are good things. I'm showing you some of them on the screen tonight. But I want to send each of you this list because the list is things that are excellently balanced for blood sugar. And so as long as you keep your portion appropriate, you're going to be within that 15-gram rule and be able to keep your blood sugar steady using this list of foods and snacks. I'm going to show a couple other things here that I want to talk about. We're going to talk about nuts for a minute. Nuts, this is red walnuts from Trader Joe's. Nuts will tend to be a higher fat food, but you heard me say earlier that I'm not really concerned if the fat is a little higher. I'm concerned if the carbs are too high. So these walnuts, for instance, I want to show you. The total carbohydrate in the walnuts is 3 grams. The total fiber in the walnuts is also 3 grams. So this is a good example of that question that was asked earlier. So if we have 3 grams of carbohydrates minus 3 grams of fiber, and in that same quarter cup portion is 5 grams of protein, this is a food that's going to be neutral on my blood sugar. It's not going to spike my blood sugar. It's going to stabilize blood sugar and is a great snack. And that serving size is a quarter cup. So one suggestion that I have for people in maintenance is that they literally scoop nuts at a quarter cup measure into little Ziploc bags or little, glass cups that they can take as their snack portion, because a quarter cup of those nuts gives them 5 grams of carbs and it's perfectly balanced as an effect on their blood sugar. I'm going to show an Optavia bar, and we're going to do the same breakdown on an Optavia bar. And I want to say that when you're in a weight loss phase, keeping the fat a little lower is often helpful for weight loss. But in the big picture, when we shift into maintenance, fat is not the culprit. It's always carbohydrates. And so much of what I'm describing in our list tonight is how to do maintenance. It's not necessarily how to do weight loss from the standpoint of, if you're going to use this methodology for weight loss, you need to really be sure that you're eating generally about 5 to 6 times a day in small, frequent portions where you've got a max of 15 grams of the net carbohydrates and you have at least 10 grams of protein with each of those snacks. When you're in maintenance, you can use walnuts as your snack, even though they're lower than 10 grams of protein, because you're not trying to burn your own fat consistently and get lower in your body weight and your body fat. So this Optavia bar is one of the examples of a product that's how I learned this rule and then went back, kind of worked backwards to find the science behind it to say, oh, that's the reason this works. So I want to show you total carbohydrates on this Optavia bar. I'm going to try to get this right where you can see it, are 13 grams of of carbohydrates per bar. And in each bar are 4 grams of fiber. So the line below the carbohydrates is always the dietary fiber. So 13 minus 4 means that the net carbs in this bar are 9. And the amount of protein in this bar is 11. So 11 grams net carbohydrates to 11 grams of protein means this food perfectly fits that balanced food category and is under the 15-gram secret number or special number that means that this is a food that's not going to raise your blood sugar and it's going to keep your blood sugar balanced. So all of the Optavia products meet that rule. That is how they're formulated. They're all under 15 grams of carbohydrates, even in their total carbs. And so when you subtract the 4 grams of fiber that's in each product, then you can know that you're going to meet the criteria to be not only meeting the 15-gram secret, but you're really keeping blood sugar balanced for the long term. One of the questions about beans that we were just talking about is, do they fit in the 5-in-1 or the 4-in-2? So here's the deal. When you are in weight loss and you're using a 5-in-1 program or a 4-in-2 program, your lean and green meals need to be a little higher in protein to sustain all the needs of your body in a day. And so beans are really hard to do that with. You notice that when I said that this serving of the cannelloni beans has a total of 8 grams of protein and that it would be neutral on blood sugar, really your goal when you're having a lean and green meal on the Optavia program is that you need to be getting above 20 grams of protein, and actually close to 25 is ideal in what we think we ought to have in a lean and green meal. So that would be a lot of beans and it would push our carbohydrate count way too high. So I would tell you that beans don't really fit on the 5-in-1 and the 4-in-2. There are some bean products that fit, and so let me talk about those for a minute. But canned beans just are not high enough you know, high enough in the protein count to counterbalance the amount of carbohydrates you'd have to get to hit your protein mark for the 5 and 1 or the 4 and 2 lean and greens. So I would just say that's a maintenance food. And I want to say that caveat again, for those of you on the Zoom tonight that are on program, if you're on the 5 and 1 or the 4 and 2, some of the foods that I'm talking about tonight are really for the maintenance phase. So it's the rule of thumb for your lifelong selection of foods. And what you want to do on the 5 and 1 is still use your Optavia products so that you've got that nice high protein during the day with no high carbs. And then in your lean and green, you need to be hitting between 20 and 25 grams of protein in order to stay on that program adequately. So let's talk about some bean products. There is a company called Explore Cuisine that is phenomenal. And in the email that we're going to send out, I have a link, and there's 3 products that they make that are awesome. So this is going to be the handout you'll get in your email. And in that handout, the first item says Explore Cuisine black bean or edamame or mung bean edamame noodles. So these are like spaghettis or fettuccine noodles that are made only of those beans, and they've extracted a lot of the carbohydrates. They've just literally pressed the beans into noodles. So the interesting thing with those noodles is if we look at a label for those noodles, they have 25 grams of protein per serving, and the carbohydrates meet our 15 gram secret rule. And so you can use, and I'm not saying that this is endorsed completely from the nutrition services at Take Shape for Life. Sometimes they have slightly different opinions than I do. So the issue though is that those bean noodles, these 3 that are made by Explore Cuisine, do meet that criteria of having enough protein for your lean and green, and they don't go over on your carbohydrate count. And so those have been one of the mainstays for me when I've been on the 5 and 1, and this month when I'm back on the 5 and 1 to cut my body fat down, I'm using those as one of my protein sources. And then I'll put like a tomato sauce on there and a side salad, and that's a lean and green meal at our house quite frequently. But I want to show you a couple other beans or bean noodles that I need to just kind of point out, because I'm trying to point some of the pitfalls out that we tend to get into in trying to shop this way. There's so many things that get confusing. So I want to show you, even though I love that Explore Cuisine brand, this is another product by Explore Cuisine, and this is certainly a product that's better than if I just bought wheat pasta. This is their organic pasta duo of chickpea penne or red lentil penne. But notice on the front, the way you can kind of differentiate, this says 11 grams of protein per serving. So that 11 grams of protein per serving was my first warning to go, these are not the same as my other ones that are 25 grams of protein per serving. So if we look at this label, I'm going to show you this label. Let's look for a minute at the total carbohydrates and the fiber in these products from the same company. So in this case, the total carbohydrate is 38. It's right there. I don't know if you can see that. And the total fiber in this product is 4 with 11 grams of protein. So if we do our little calculation and we say, what's the net carbs? So 35 grams of protein minus, 35 grams of carbs minus 4 of fiber means there's 31 grams net of carbohydrate in this product. And our protein is only 11. And I go, nah, sorry, this one doesn't do it. So if we're looking at foods that sometimes seem great, like I would look at this label and go, wow, plant-based protein, chickpeas and lentils, those are great foods. I know that on their own, those are great foods. When they've processed this product, they've actually not taken away or they've somehow shifted the carbon protein ratio so that this product does not meet our 15 gram secret rule and would not be something I advise. Now there's a little trick to what you could do with this. If you ate chicken with it and had half a portion instead of a whole portion, so they're saying a portion of this would be 2 ounces dry. So if you used 1 ounce of this and made it up into your pasta, you would have been below the 15 grams of carbohydrate, and then you could put some kind of meat with that or a meat sauce with it, and you'd be okay. there are some other products that you may be familiar with. This is a black bean pasta from Trader Joe's. So if we look at this pasta, it has 35 grams of carbohydrate, again, right here. So 35 grams of carbohydrate. But what's great with this one is they left more of the fiber in it. They didn't extract it out. So this has 15 grams of fiber. So 35 minus 15 is 20. We're getting close. And so instead of having this whole serving, which is 3/4 of a cup, you could have a half cup serving of this, and you'd be staying below the 15 gram secret, and the amount of protein is 14. So 20 to 14 is a spread of 6. It barely doesn't make our rule of needing to be within 5 on my net carbs and protein with each other. But if you took the portion size down by 1/4 cup and added your chicken or something beside it, this would be still a great meal. So honorable mention to Trader Joe's black bean pasta, but not a freebie that would equal all of my protein for my meal, because that protein is too low. Another question coming up is, and thank you guys for asking questions when something needs clarified. Somebody asked, what is the 5 and 1 or the 4 and 2? What does that mean? So tiny brief diversion here. When I started working with weight loss, I had 9 years of just struggling to teach people whole food eating, and very few people could keep at it long enough to see success and stay interested. We tend to get discouraged if we don't see success, and then we fall off the wagon. And usually, unfortunately, as human beings, we fall off the wagon in a bad way. We usually get worse than we were before we got on the wagon. So when I started working with weight loss specifically, I had needed a program. I was looking for a program that was really predictable in its results. And I started using a program that's now called Optavia. It had a different name at that time. But Optavia is a program where it combines 4 components, and one of the components is the way you eat. And we call the way you eat either the 5 and 1 or the 4 and 2. What that means is you're going to order products that are perfectly balanced for blood sugar maintenance and use those products. They're little packaged meals, but they are no artificial sweeteners and no artificial colors. And so they are packaged so that you don't have to actually know everything I'm trying to teach you in this month in order to stay on program and start to succeed at lowering inflammation and cholesterol, and weight falls off too. So those components are one part of the Optavia program. Those are the ways we eat on the Optavia program for weight loss. And then the other components are community and education and a coach. And all of those come for free along with the person on that program. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some other food selections. Part of the reason I use Optavia as a program is that it meets this rule. Like, I learned it because I used Optavia first and said, this is working, and this has been used by some of the major institutions in our land. It's what the Hopkins Weight Loss Center was founded, or has used for years successfully. But what I was looking for behind it was the principles, so that we could continue to learn those principles for lifelong maintenance of low inflammation and peak performance. And so one of the beautiful things is that in the Optavia program, there's an education system called Habits of Health, that if you're on that program, I highly recommend you read that book and that you learn that with your coach. But when we're now talking about how do we translate out what we do for the rest of our life in maintenance, I wanted to make that really explicit. And this 15 gram secret is a good way to keep that paramount in your mind and have a tool to use. So a couple other things I want to show you that are some great things to know. Some of you saw a couple weeks ago, I think I posted on Facebook, this product. So these are some little protein crisps. These are like snacks. They taste basically like a barbecue potato chip, but they're not. And so these protein crisps were at Sam's here in the desert. And what Robert and I saw them and we're like, okay, let's read that label, because we're so used to seeing things that claim something but then aren't necessarily true. So with these protein crisps, couple things. Yes, they're non-GMO, for those of you that wanted to know that. So they're gluten-free, non-GMO, and kosher. And then a couple other things that I wanted to mention about them that are great. If I look at this label and I'm reading the label and it says total carbohydrates is 10, and total fiber is 4. So 10 minus 4 means my impact of one serving is 6 grams net carbohydrates, and the protein is 10. And I was like, woohoo, we're gonna buy these and try them. And so I got them home and I looked at the sample size. I was like, okay, so what's the serving size? I mean, and the serving size is 1 ounce, which is 28 grams. And so I got out my little food scale and I weighed out 28 grams of these chips so I could see how big of a portion it was. And it was pretty great. It was like the amount you'd put in a kid's sandwich bag for a lunch. And they've now said it's about 24 of these little crisps. So if I want to have something crunchy, I'll count about 24 of these out into a little bowl or into my Ziploc bag to take with me. And what's not only great is it satisfies a craving for crunch and for a barbecue flavor, but it keeps my blood sugar steady. So this actually is a perfect little protein snack that when I have had a nice breakfast and now it's 10 o'clock in the morning and I'm ready for my next fueling to keep my blood sustained, my brain working well, this is a great little snack. And that whole amount was 90 calories. So it was 90 calories, 10 grams of protein, and net 6 grams of carbohydrate. So I went online to read about this company. I went to look. And what I learned was that this particular thing, these protein crisps, come in about 4 flavors. And so I like that because I can get the, garlicky dill or whatever other flavors they have. But what I also noticed, just as a buyer beware, is the same company makes rice crisps that don't meet our 15-gram criteria. So knowing how to read the label saved me from just going, wow, this company's awesome. They've got their act together. Let me order everything they have. Rather than that, I really was able to look at it and go, okay, all of their protein crisps look great, but their rice crisps don't meet that criteria and I shouldn't buy those. Good. Let me see. A couple other options. One of the things I carry in my purse quite frequently for snacks is this. Now these are olives in a nice little package from Trader Joe's. And these actually are all about fat. These are a healthy fat. So if I look at this is a good example of what someone was asking earlier, where there were no carbs and no fiber to subtract. So the total carbohydrates in this case are less than 1, and the total fiber is less than 1. And these have 2.5 grams of fat and 25 calories per little package and no protein. So these are just pure fat. The thing that's beautiful about pure fat is that it doesn't raise your blood sugar at all. It's just stable. And so if I need a little snack to keep going, and I'm not trying to lose weight, so it's not that I'm trying to get some protein in to keep my metabolism running to lose weight, this is a great option in maintenance to carry in your purse or carry with you as one of your small meal replacements in your day, one of your little snacks through the day. Another couple options, I'm going to show a lean cuisine. So those of you that are on Optavia can close your ears for a minute because you know this is not what I would recommend for you in your weight loss phase. But I wanted to mention this because many times people are looking for options that are ways they can find something in a pinch. So if you're looking for an option and you're on the road and maybe you forgot, your most optimal options for meal replacements, this is another option that a patient brought in and said, does this meet the 15-gram secret? So this is a roasted turkey and vegetable meal, and the carbohydrate count on this meal was 19 grams and the fiber was 4. So if I take 19 and I subtract 4, we've got 15 grams of carbohydrate. So we squeak into that number. And then this has protein at 19 grams, which was more than our carbohydrate count. So it fit. And I said, yep, you did great. You picked wisely. It looked good. Another couple options I want to mention, because there's some things that we assume are going to be high in protein and they're not necessarily. This is Progresso chicken soup. It has little pearls of pasta in it, so it's not gluten-free. But in this Progresso soup, there are 12 grams of carbohydrate and 1 gram of fiber. So 12 minus 1 means we're at 11 grams of carbohydrate, which that fits, right? The 11 grams of net carbs fits within the 15-gram secret. But if I look at the protein content on this, it's only 5. So from the standpoint of being enough protein to really balance my blood sugar, it's just barely too low. So if you were going to do chicken soup, obviously having a chicken soup that was highest in protein would be what you'd be looking for. But when you make your homemade chicken soup, one way you could do this at home is just to not put noodles in your chicken soup. Substitute it with other things like green veggies. And then the other thing is, if I was going to have this chicken soup and I was trying to keep the protein load up closer to that 10-gram amount that's really helpful when people are in fat burning and weight loss, I would add chicken to this, or I would add more protein to this. I'm going to see if there's anything else I wanted specifically to
Jeralyn,
mention from my grab bag here. I'll
Jeralyn.
mention one other thing, and then we'll open up to some questions. This is a product at Trader Joe's. I'm going to read what it says. They are gluten-free crisp breads. I noticed at Gelson's yesterday that there's something really similar to this that are called Norwegian crisp breads on the shelf. And there's something awesome about this when you're looking for a food or a snack item that you could use that gives you sort of a bread-like crunch or a cracker-like crunch. So these, I'm going to read what the label says because it's hard to see it. It's kind of crinkly. But when you have one crisp of these crisps, they have 130 calories and they have 6 grams of carbohydrate. Now what's awesome is that the fiber is 3 and the protein is 4. So if there's 6 grams of carbohydrate and 3 grams of fiber, that means my net carbs are 3 and my protein is 4. So this is a food that's perfectly balanced for blood sugar. Using one of these crisps with a little bit of avocado on it happens to be Kirsten, my nurse's favorite snack. She and I will often have that even for breakfast or a snack at the office. And these crisp breads are gluten-free. They're filled with nuts and seeds, so they've got lots of healthy fat and good vitamins and nutrients in them, and they're not going to be over on your carb count. So when you get your email this week, I just want to mention that the email has a list of a whole bunch of things that are shopping items you could buy. It is geared more towards a low meat content, not because I have anything against meat, but meat is not my expertise because I'm vegetarian. And certainly if you're eating meat, what you want to do is be sure that you have at least a 3-ounce portion. If you're in your Optavia program and using it for your lean and green meal, you need at least 3 ounces of meat in your lean and green. And that gives you at least 21 grams of protein. And all the great ways that there are to cook meat, if you look into some of the Optavia websites, you'll see lots of recipes to make lean and green meals with great meat components. But my biggest question I receive about recipes is, how do you do this as a vegetarian? So my shopping list that I'm sending you is really geared in that direction. Okay, I am going to look at a couple of the questions. Somebody said, how many servings in that can? Pat, I think you were talking about the chicken soup. So the Progresso chicken soup has 2 cups in it, which is 2 servings. Thank you. Pat just pointed out a really good point. If I, as a person, ate this whole can and read the label thinking that I was getting 12 grams total of carbohydrate, I would have fooled myself. And it's one of the sneaky things that the food industry tends to do. I find it the most abhorrent, I guess I could say, when I look at the naked juices. When you look at a naked juice and they've got like 36 grams of carbohydrate in the naked juice, that's per serving, and there's usually 2 servings in a bottle. So if you guzzle the whole bottle, that would be 72 grams of carbohydrate and send your blood sugar through the roof. Juices and smoothies can be one of the spots that are the hardest, or they're the easiest to get out of whack, just because you can get so high in the carbs. One of the first labels I read was Trader Joe's pad thai, and they have a vegetarian pad thai that I thought, oh my gosh, this looks great. My kids are going to love it. I'll like it. And it's 64 grams of carbohydrate. And there's just no way that that's good for anybody. You could, if you took that 64 grams and portioned it down to 15 grams, it would mean that maybe you could eat a half a cup or, less than half a cup to not hit that 15-gram secret. So yes, reading and looking at labels makes a lot of sense. Molly has a question. So fat without protein, not good for weight loss. Actually, let me clarify that. On the Optavia program, when you're working to be in fat burning and stay in fat burning, people need to have protein to sustain their muscle. So you can burn body fat. You have this virtually unlimited store of body fat that you can burn. But if you want to stay in fat burning and you're trying to preserve muscle mass, you need to have some protein in your day. You can't just eat pure fat. And so the way that the Optavia program addresses that is that the Optavia program has every meal replacement have at least 10 grams of protein. That means you'll get 50 from your 5 meals in your day. And then you have a lean and green meal once a day that has about 25. So the total protein intake on the Optavia program on the 5-in-1 is about 75 grams of protein. And that preserves muscle so that you don't degrade muscle for your own nutrition during fat burning. So if people are doing a ketogenic diet where they're not on the Optavia program, you do need your meals in a ketogenic diet need to have some protein. So Molly, you're right. Fat as your only source of calories for a day would not be okay. It's not that, for instance, the olives that I held up don't have any protein. Those are fine as a snack, but if I ate olives as my only intake all day long, I would be malnourished. So you need to have protein in your day, and I would generally guide people that in the meals that they're eating, either on a ketogenic diet or for sure if they're on the Optavia 5-in-1 or 4-in-2, you want to aim at 20 to 25 grams of protein per lean and green meal or per meal. Okay, I am going to continue to answer questions. And so if you want to ask a question, down in the lower left corner of your screen is a way to unmute yourself. You click on the little microphone and that'll let me hear your question. Does muscle gain, one question is, does muscle gain require higher calories and higher protein? Awesome question. Yes. So in order to build muscle, and thank you, I don't know who asked that question, but I know that that was the point of a couple people that are on the Zoom tonight that want to build muscle. You both need to have higher caloric intake in your day, and you also need to have protein intake that is more than your lean body mass. If you're in the desert and you want to know your lean body mass, we can do an in-body, and that will actually give you pounds of lean body mass. I'll tell you, for instance, just to give you a frame of reference, my body's lean mass, which means my protein and muscle mass, is about 96 pounds of lean body mass. So my lean body mass is a rough guide to how much protein I would need to take in every day to add muscle to my frame. So if I want to add muscle to my frame, I have to get in more than 96 grams of protein. And that will generally also mean higher calories if I'm doing that. So yes, that's exactly right. Questions, guys, we're open and we've got about 10 minutes left that we can ask some questions or talk about specific foods. And my challenge to each of you this week is to just do a pantry survey and or look at some of the foods that you're eating. Read labels if you're in the grocery store. Read labels and see if you can find foods that meet this secret. Because if they do, then you're going to start to fill your pantry with foods that are default good for you. And one of the things we'll do in our next session is I'm going to go through, there's 2 websites that'll be on your email that you get. There are websites that show you how to do this for foods that don't have labels. So if you go to, this will be in the email, www.nutritionfacts.self.com, that you can type in broccoli and you can put 1 cup of broccoli and it'll tell you your grams of carbohydrate, your grams of fiber, and your grams of protein for that food. And you can adjust the portion size to what's realistic to what you're doing as well. Okay, so one question, and I love it. I'm reading some of these questions. Ellen says, thanks for the ideas. Yeah, I'm hoping that this next email that comes out will give you lots more ideas to expand your horizons if you've been feeling like you're a little bit limited in your repertoire. Someone's asking, in regard to the ratio of proteins, whey and collagen. So collagen is a protein and whey is a protein, and there are lots of other protein sources. So if you're looking, those 2 happen to be common ones in protein shakes. So if you're looking at protein shake referencing, it really does not matter what the ratio is as far as its effect on fat burning or keeping your blood sugar steady or keeping your insulin steady. So you could have whey, or you could have collagen protein, or you could have even casein. My personal preference is not casein, just because it tends to be more inflammatory in people's bodies. So I use mixtures of whey and collagen and pea protein and rice protein and even mushroom protein as sources of protein powders that I might use. The only thing with collagen is I would be cautious about using more than about 1 scoop of collagen protein in a day, because much of collagen protein is bound to a scaffolding structure that can cause kidney stones in the long run. So I sell a collagen in my office that I have found that's a really tiny molecule of collagen, and that way it doesn't have that issue. But if you're just buying collagen off the shelf, and I like collagen as a protein, using that as your only protein source may cause you other health problems that don't have anything to do with your blood sugar. So Pat, let me have you unmute and ask your question. I thank you for letting us know that you have a question.
Yeah, you mentioned
I can't hear you yet, girlfriend.
that's unusual. You mentioned to I'm not
It
muted.
says that you're unmuted. I'm wondering if maybe it's my computer. Robert, there we go. Try it again, Pat. It was my computer.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. You mentioned to gain muscle, you'd have to eat, like in your case, 96 grams of protein.
Mm-hmm.
Would that, is that 96 grams of protein and certain exercise, or, how do you not just gain weight?
So a couple things. Thank you for talking my language. Now you let my gynecologist out of the box, so to speak. So here's the story. To build muscle, there's 3 ingredients that are necessary. 1 is protein, 1 is testosterone, and 1 is working out. Okay. So if you want to add muscle to your frame, and we as women, this is something we should do another webinar. I'll do a Facebook Live about building muscle, because when we as women age, and it happens to guys, but not to near the extent as women. So we lose about 1 pound of muscle per year after the age of 20. It's called sarcopenia, and Dr. Anderson talks about it in his Habits of Health book. So when we lose muscle, the ways that we can combat that are, number 1, it's one of the reasons I signed on and decided to use Optavia to begin with, was because it preserved muscle with enough protein intake that people don't lose muscle. But there's a difference between preserving muscle, like holding on to what you got, versus adding to what you got, right? So what Optavia does beautifully is hold on to what you got. What it doesn't do for most people is take their amount of muscle that they're coming to it with and add to it. So if you're wanting to add muscle, which I need to do, I'm guessing you need to do, just because I know you and have hugged you, our body frame is such that we're going to struggle to build muscle just because we're girls and we go through menopause, lose our testosterone that's made from our ovaries. And so for you and I to gain muscle, what we would need to do is work out and eat enough protein that we've got excess ingredients. It's like you can't build a brick wall if you don't have any bricks. You can't build muscle if you don't have extra protein. The testosterone side of things gets into the gynecology world, but one of the things that we've learned is that women thrive with a little bit of testosterone. So if Stan has some testosterone, tell him to cuddle up, because you need some to rub off on you. But my point being that it's actually very reasonable for women to have testosterone levels checked. And if your testosterone levels are below the midpoint of normal, it's very reasonable to add some testosterone, because it'll help you build muscle. And then the working out and the exercise that you do and boosting your protein. You won't gain weight with that extra protein unless you're pushing your carbs higher. Because as long as we keep that same, in my head, I'm seeing the picture of that beautiful curve of blood sugar out of Dr. Anderson's book. When we keep our blood sugar steady, we don't spike insulin and we don't gain weight. So you can boost your protein in your meals and safely not gain weight. And then sustain muscle. Yeah.
Very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. I have sometimes thought I just need to stand on a corner with testosterone shots and give them to all of us women who want to build muscle. It's not quite that simple, but it is a good thing. Robert, you're asking the question again about collagen. Is it okay if I use collagen as the primary protein source? I briefly touched on that collagen can cause problems if you use large amounts of collagen as your protein source. It's collagen in most of the versions that we're buying in the grocery store, and even things like Bulletproof and Dr. Axe, which I like those doctors' products most of the time. But those collagen molecules are large collagen molecules. They're measured in kilodaltons, and those molecules are bigger than 600 kilodaltons, which means your muscle and joints can't approximate them into where you're trying to rebuild your meniscus in your knee, for instance, or trying to pad a joint in your shoulder. So they're not as good for joint pain if you're using those collagens. And if you're using them instead of protein, high volume of collagen can lead to kidney stones. So you just want to keep it, I would keep it to 12 grams or so. The collagen I recommend is from a company called Orthomolecular. Thanks, Rachel, for asking. Orthomolecular is a company that sells through physicians and makes a collagen that is less than 300 kilodaltons in size and has already had the part of it that can cause kidney stones broken off of it. So that's the one I would search out and find somebody that you can buy that one from. Does it make sense that if I go back to the carbohydrate question, I realize that when I say the 15-gram secret, the bottom line is keep your carb count at any one meal less than 15 grams net carbohydrates. The protein story in combining protein with the carbohydrate is really about how you can stay at a blood sugar level that will keep you in fat burning and help you not gain weight. So that's the secondary part of the 15-gram secret, is that you want to keep your protein balanced with your carbohydrate so that you don't have any issues with falling out of fat burning. Anybody else have a question? I'm looking down here to see if anybody else has written a question in.
What do we look for in our collagen containers?
So here's the dirty secret. You're not going to find it.
I figured that.
The problem is that any company that's making large molecule collagen is not going to tell you that there's any problem with it, right? So all of the collagens that I've been able to find, on the market that are really, what I can buy just in a bag at Clark's or Sprouts or a health food store, don't advertise what their kilodalton size is. So what you're looking for, if you were going to call that company, Pat, I would call that company. In fact, I see the bottle you have, and that's a company that's pretty popular, and they've been doing a good job marketing. I would call the company and ask them, can you tell me the kilodalton size of your collagen molecule? See if they'll tell you. I think it's kind of the same story as yogurt. We all know that we want probiotics in our intestines. And so companies like Dannon and Dan Active, they'll make a product that they'll say live cultures and you should eat our yogurt because it's going to boost your probiotics. But notice that they never tell you how much they have in their product. And they're protecting themselves. It's a little bit of a CYA move because there are live cultures in your yogurt, but it might be that there was, 10,000 live cultures. And we really don't make a bit of difference to our gut with live cultures until you get up into the billions. And they're not telling you that they don't have that much in there. So it's kind of a marketing gimmick. So if they're not telling you the amount, it's because they don't necessarily want to talk about that. Sherry Kuhn, let me see a little note here. Miracle noodles or shirataki noodles that are no carb options for pasta or pad thai. Yeah, absolutely. So what you're talking about are noodles that are made from some very non-starchy components like seaweed, or the shirataki noodles I think are from seaweed. And Russ, I'm just muting you for a moment because I'm getting feedback when you're, there we go. Thanks, bud. So the miracle noodles and the shirataki noodles have no carbohydrates. Some of the tricks to preparing them are that you want to rinse them really well. Otherwise, they kind of have a fishy flavor to them. But if you rinse them really well and have them with a good sauce, they're a no carb option. My main caution with those is this. Our tendency in America is that we think deprivation is next to godliness. And I just wish we could bust that myth up. Your job as a human being is to take such good care of your body with love and nourishment and fabulous nutrition that you thrive. And so the only issue I have with Miracle Noodles is that if you're eating nothing, you're eating nothing. And what you're really wanting to do is find an option that nourishes you. So I use those noodles sometimes, especially if I have a sauce that's really full of phenomenal vegetables and lots of good nutrition in my sauce, and I'm wanting to not add carbs. But if I have an option to use a food that has incredible phytonutrients because it's a plant food, like for instance, riced cauliflower is a great option instead of rice. And then I'm getting all the nutrition from the cauliflower. That's a little bit of a better option. So I do use Miracle Noodles and Shirataki noodles. They're great no-carb options, but you just want to be sure that you're getting good nutrition in, not filling your stomach up with things that have minimal nutrition. And so they're a good option, but you know, Sherry, if you want to ask something further about that, just unmute yourself in the lower corner. I see that maybe you have a little question. Not sure. And then Russ, I'm not sure if you may be unmuted because you wanted to say something too. Give a moment here for a couple of questions before we sign off.
Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Oh, right. Yeah, I don't know how this is working out. Yeah, I got a couple questions here, but I don't know if they came through. What's the total carb count then for a whole day of the Optivia meal plan situation?
You got it. So it's generally under 90. So just to give you a framework, every Optivia product has a maximum of 15 grams of carbohydrate. And in most cases, we recommend 5 of those products a day. So 5 times 15 is your carb count from your Optivia meals. And then the only thing that makes that number a number I can't say to you every Optivia person is eating exactly 90 is that you get the freedom to choose a meal that's your lean and green meal when you're on that program. So
Right.
that lean and green meal might mean tonight I picked broccoli and tomorrow night I picked spinach, and broccoli is a little higher carb than spinach. So, you know, I might have a little variation in the carbohydrate count just because of the vegetables I put in my lean and green. Or in my case, since I'm doing a veggie patty, for instance, I would count the carbohydrates in that Trader Joe high protein patty. You know, it still has 8 grams net carbohydrates, and so I would count that in my carb count for the day. But it generally ends up being about 75 to 80 of protein and 80 to 90 of carbohydrate in your day. And then most of the time you're getting more than 4 grams of fiber each meal. So it ends up that your carbs are lower than your protein for your total day if you're doing net carbs.
Great, thanks. And
Yeah.
and calories?
Calories, every one of the Optivia meals is between 100 and 110 calories. There's a couple that might be closer even to 95, but never more than 110. So your total calories for the day when you're on the 5 and 1 are really under 800 in most cases. And just a warning, a shout out here. What's beautiful about that is it harnesses every angle of weight loss. Even though you heard me last week say that calories weren't what I recommended counting, when you have a decrease in calories and you have even levels of insulin, you have the optimal situation to lose weight and burn fat. And so because those criteria are met, plus you've got enough protein to preserve muscle, you have this optimal environment that lets you burn your own body fat, preserve your own muscle, and keep the calorie count fairly low. There is one of my colleagues within Optivia is a Dr. Cheryl Childs, and she's phenomenal at describing how that status, that safety spot of being in fat burning with that amount of protein and that amount of carbs and that amount of fiber keeps you in fat burning. And as long as you're in fat burning in this program with that amount of protein carb ratio, you actually have no damage to any tissue in the body. There's a lot of diets, and right now it's really been hard as a physician with so many of the ketogenic diets. There's a lot of ketogenic diets that people are hurting themselves with, I guess I would say. I'm not against ketogenic diets. I think there's some real value to those principles. But one of the issues is that I have some people who have genetics that mean that they start to hold on to the fat and they spike their cholesterol on a ketogenic diet, for instance. And I can only know that by either trial and error or testing their genes. And so what I have appreciated that Dr. Cheryl Childs taught me was just when you look at the safety net of having a person stay in fat burning with enough protein and carb ratios that they protect their organs, they protect their cholesterol levels at healthy levels. It's one of the remarkable reasons that I continue to stand behind Optavia. It meets those criteria. And I think there's other ways to skin a cat. It's not that there aren't, it's just that it's predictable and safe. So it's an easy one for me to stand behind. You all are such troopers. It's 8 minutes after 7, and I appreciate everybody hanging in for a good hour of information. What we're going to do after we get off the call, we're going to send an email out to you that has the list of more geared, a little bit more vegetarian, but a lot of products that are going to be things you could use that would be stabilizing to blood sugar. And it's divided. The first section is just a list of all the items I could brainstorm. So if you're needing a shopping list, it's a good shopping list. And then I divide it into proteins that would be for a main meal and side dishes. So side dishes could be even things like cauliflower mac and cheese, for instance, or things that you might have on the side next to your protein. And then I have a whole section that's snacks or mini meals that would be the little mini meals you could eat in between your main meals when you're in maintenance so that you stay on track with your blood sugar. Okay, I'm going to wrap us up. I appreciate everybody being here. Watch your emails, and we will be coming in to our program next week. One last question I see popping in: how many grams of fat per day? On Optavia, it's fairly low fat. Actually, it's about 2.5 per meal. So I think that adds up to less than 15. But in general, I'm not worried about the fat, and it's not part of the 15-gram secret. Okay, everybody, see you next week. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.
Night, everybody.
Good night, Pat. Good night, all.
Good night.
Great stuff.
Good night, Russ.